Hi everybody. Who would have known that the round ball game would become so big in Australia, eh? Anyway, before I begin, I'd like to acknowledge the Wiradjuri people as the traditional owners of the land on which we are meeting this evening. And I'd like to recognize their unique contribution to our environmental and cultural heritage, past, present, and future. And I'd like to extend my deepest respect to all First Nations people in attendance here today, live or online as well, because as you know, this is being streamed online. It's also being recorded, so for those people who have not been able to make it tonight, this will be available on our website. My name's Mark Evans, and I'm the Deputy Vice-Chancellor of Research here at Charles Sturt University, and your host for this evening. This is a provocations public lecture. And essentially, at the beginning of this year, we launched a series of lectures around the theme provocations, including addresses such as this one, panel discussions. There's also a podcast series as well in our Yindiyamara program run by, which is led by Stan Grant. And basically, those activities seek to focus on developing big ideas in relation to big challenges. And those challenges are kind of focused around regional Australia, but as soon as you start to get to the meat of those challenges, you can see that they are global in scope and reach. So I'd like to take this opportunity now to launch our Provocations blogging series. So all of our lectures are accompanied now by a blog. And obviously, we encourage engagement and interaction with the blog. So we'll just play the video to introduce the Provocations blog. So if you go along to the website, you'll find a whole range of provocations aimed at challenging orthodoxy, written by provocateurs Clive Hamilton, Sharon McLeod, who's just joined us. Hi, Sharon. Wayne Hudson, and Patrick Walsh. And on each topic, obviously we encourage reasoned online engagement and debate. So this evening's lecture will further strengthen our range of provocations, entitled Behavioural Data Science as a Game Changer for Understanding the Interface Between Human and Digital Systems in the New Digital Economy. Professor Ganna Pogrebna, a genuine pioneer in behavioural data science, will introduce the field, discuss the impact of the field on cybersecurity, financial services, talent management, and leadership, amongst other areas, and demonstrate how this new field not only offers new models and methods of understanding, but also provides significant innovations in the context of the new digital economy and the Industrial Revolution 4.0. A few words by way of introducing Ganna. And look, Ganna's intellectual journey has been absolutely incredible. She studied economics at the University of Missouri, Kansas City, and the University of Innsbruck in Austria. She holds a PhD in economics and social sciences. And before coming to Charles Sturt, Ganna worked at Columbia University in New York, the University of Bonn, Humboldt University in Berlin, the University of Innsbruck in Austria, and she's held professorships at the University of Warwick, the University of Birmingham, and Sydney University. She also serves as lead of the Behavioural Data Science strand at the Alan Turing Institute. That's the National Centre for Artificial Intelligence and Data Science in London that has significant impact throughout the world. So she blends behavioural science, artificial intelligence, computer science, data analytics, engineering, and business models. And she helps cities, businesses, charities, and individuals to better understand why they make the decisions they make and how they can optimize the behavior to achieve higher profit, to achieve better social outcomes, as well as flourish and bolster their well-being. So Ganna's work on risk analytics and modeling was recognized by a Leverhulme Research Fellowship Award in January 2020. She was named as the winner of Tech Women 100, and that's a prize awarded to leading female experts in science, technology, engineering, and mathematics in the UK. And she was also named as one of 20 inspiring data scientists by the AI Time Journal. I mean, we are so lucky when Ganna agreed to join us as the inaugural director of our Artificial Intelligence and Cyber Futures Institute here at Charles Sturt. So I give you Ganna Pogrebna.
Thank you, Mark. Thanks for being here. Yeah, I'm actually humbled that I have the audience today, considering that Matilda's applying. Yeah. So I'm Ganna Pogrebna, and I'm a behavioral data scientist. And I just wanted to ask, how many people heard about behavioral data science? Okay, wow, that's quite a few. So when I kind of came into the field, it wasn't called anything, so we had to come up with a name. Like Mark said, my original education was in economics. I'm a decision theorist. So in case you don't know who decision theorists are, we're kind of really frustrated people down in the microeconomics area. And why we're frustrated all the time is because we write models of human behavior, but then humans do not behave according to the models, so we have to write new models, then we test them again, they don't work again, then we kind of develop new models again. So, and that's how the field develops. And basically, yeah, at one point in my life, I got a job in engineering department, and since that time, I kind of do things that are more data scientists, and they became more and more data scientists as I kind of went along. Yeah, just kind of to give you an idea of where you can find more information, we will have a book coming up this year with Cambridge University Press on behavioral data science, where you can read kind of a lot of interesting things about methodology. We also have a website where we kind of post practical things. So the website is in operation. You can actually go to behavioraldatascience.org and find, again, a lot of interesting material to read if you're interested in the field. Yeah, so what is behavioral data science? So behavioral data science is an interdisciplinary field which combines behavioral science methods with a lot of natural science methods, mostly from computing. But I'm going to introduce all kind of parts of behavioral data science, so you will see how it goes. So yeah, I already introduced myself. I explained my journey from sort of decision theorist into a behavioral data scientist. And yeah, again, if you are interested in the work that I do, I'm on all social media. So if you cannot find me, it's your fault. Yeah, so essentially, yeah, there is a lot of material. Yeah, this is kind of a short list of organizations that I worked with in my career. And there is kind of a longer list that's available probably on my website. But the point is, like, why I'm able to work with all of these organizations is because a lot of my work is very methodological and mathematical, and then it applies to a lot of different domains. So the mathematics behind it kind of stays the same, but it could be applied to different areas. I was told that this is a provocation series, so I should say something provocative. So this is my provocative line, and I always like to give kind of people some elevator pitch, and this is what I'm going to be talking about today. Nations, organizations, and individuals do not have data problems. They have decision problems. And these decision problems are usually, supported by some sort of data, right? And then we always sort of judge whether the data is good enough to solve a particular problem, right? So it's always, so when we look at data, we never look at data in isolation. We always look at data in the context of decision making. So if the data is helpful to you in solving a particular problem or making a particular decision, it's good data, otherwise it's probably not very good data. And the field of behavioral data science is kind of helping you to get you kind of to the solution with minimum means, yeah? So sometimes you don't have enough data, but you can then potentially use some behavioral theory to substitute for the lack of data. Yeah, so kind of, I just wanted to go from a practical side because I know that the audience here today is not just from academia, but also from private and public sector. And essentially what we normally observe in many organizations is there are these two camps of people usually sitting on different floors. We have data science camp who work with hard data, and they normally sit somewhere in the basement in organizations and don't talk to anyone. They just work with models and produce insights from, something that they observe. And then we have behavioral scientists who sit somewhere at the top floor, and they're more interested in the why customers do something, why people do something. And they work with soft data, right? They normally go out and ask people to explain their decisions. And these two camps they all produce value and insights, but they never talk to each other. And a lot of times what my team does when we arrive to any organization, we kind of get all these two camps into one room, and then we'll try to figure out how they could work together. Yeah, and normally this collaboration produces better insights and allows us to solve interesting problems. Yeah, so why I asked you whether you heard about behavioral data science. So before I started talking about it, is that there's a lot of kind of interesting information online, and it's not always correct. Because a lot of people think that data science is some sort of behavioral analytics. It's not. Some people think that it's some sort of fancy marketing or digital marketing. It's not. So the field itself, and we've been looking at it while we were doing the handbook over several years, is essentially split into three main parts. There is human behavior, algorithmic behavior, and systems behavior. So in human behavior, you normally find people like myself who come from either economics background or psychology background, and we're trying to understand how humans operate, in the world, and how they perceive technology, how they interact with technology. The second strand on algorithmic behavior is a strand where people look into algorithms. Normally, they come from kind of statistical background or more mathematical background. And here you have like really cool people like my colleague Marisa Chop from Switzerland, who basically develops IQ tests for various algorithms, and her job is to figure out, is Siri smarter than Cortana, or something like this. Yeah, just to tell you the answer, Siri is smarter than Cortana. And finally, we have systems behavior people. So these are normally people who come from engineering background, and they look at complex systems. So basically how humans interact with technology in a complex system, let's just say a city or a transport system, so things like this. Yeah. So there are two components to behavioral data science. We have behavioral science and we have data science. And behavioral science is a conceptual field, right? That gives us some theories and models of the world that help us understand what it is, right? Help us make sense of the world. Data science is a methodological field. It's a service field. So what it can do, it can help us build something based on theory. But theory needs to come from somewhere else. And here it comes from behavioral science. So it's a little bit like the distinction between mathematics and engineering, right? So mathematics gives us some models of the world, and then engineering can help us build a bridge based on some mathematical principles. So it's a similar mix, right? And here we have normally kind of 4 strands of methods from taking so the first strand in green there. What it does essentially, it takes behavioral theory and it tests it on huge data, right? So it's essentially like running a standard behavioral science study, but you would have, instead of kind of randomized control trial or an experiment, you will have a large data set. Then you can use traditional data science techniques to solve behavioral problems. That's also very interesting, and I will give some examples. Another strand is kind of helping us to overcome deficiencies in data science methods by using some behavioral theory. And finally, so this is where my work is mostly concentrated, is hybrid models. So this is when we actually mix behavioral science methods into machine learning methods, and we come up with new machine learning methods, which are normally quite cool and allow us to do a lot of cool things. Yeah, so why do we need all of this, all this field? Well, I'm just gonna talk about one example because I really like concrete things rather than general. So as you know, we already lived through 4 industrial revolutions. We're now living through the 4th one. And these are kind of like all the industrial revolutions that happened, but and kind of a skeptic view at each of them. Like my personal favorite is the one about the automation revolution, where it was kind of suggested that there is no reason for any individual to have a computer in his home. Well, now not only we have computers in our homes, we have computers in our pockets. So obviously, so the point of showing you this is that, it's the industrial revolution 4.0 with AI, it already happened, right? So AI is no longer an emerging technology, it's a standard technology, and it affects everybody, and it affects jobs, but it affects jobs in the same way, in the sense that it affected jobs, that other industrial revolutions affected jobs, and we adapted and we lived through it. So I'm an optimist in that sense. There are many jobs that are replaceable, as you know, and there are many jobs that are high risk. And it's no longer enough to be kind of in a creative profession to be protected against automation. In fact, we have, music composed by AI. You can write a script with AI, and do a lot of other things. Yeah, and there are different sort of ways in which we understand this, and there are different sort of projections and looks at industry of the future. Some projections are quite optimistic, so some are pessimistic. So the most famous pessimistic view comes from University of Oxford. The most famous optimistic view comes from OECD. But basically, the point is that between 10% and like 45% of jobs will be affected as a result of the current industrial revolution. And the way we normally analyze the jobs is using behavioral theory in combination with labor economics. Essentially, what we do is we split all the skills that you need for a job into kind of basic, creative, and social. And the more social component you have in the job, the less replaceable you are. So we can come up with graphs like this and actually tell in any organization, approximately what the risk is of particular profession to be replaced. Well, I always kind of say to organizations that if you can exactly explain what you are doing, exactly describe what you are doing, then you're very much replaceable, because then machine can do it as well. If you are struggling, like as an institute director, I'm really struggling to explain what I'm doing on a daily basis. So then it's hard to replace. So and the point of showing you this is also like we on a regular basis we go out and ask people about their attitude towards industrial revolution, and what we observe is actually quite an interesting thing. So when we ask, will industrial revolution affect the industry, almost everybody says yes. But when we ask people, will industrial revolution affect your job in particular, almost everybody says no. So clearly industrial revolution will affect people, but not us, not me individually. And that's true for any country, including Australia. Yeah, so like my point here is that, we have this illusion of control, that we are controlling technology, but actually we're not controlling anything. Imagine that everything that dependent on technology today wouldn't work. We wouldn't be here today, we wouldn't be sitting in this room, you wouldn't be listening to this lecture. So currently we don't need, creative skills anymore to be protected against sort of automation. But we need transferable skills. So we actually need to learn how to be adaptive to technology. And in a sense, if previously we looked at sort of just machine algorithms and kind of human component in organizations, currently we need sort of kind of like a neo, right? So it's no longer just architect, no longer just Oracle, but you need a hybrid. And as a leader, in any organization, you would currently not just lead a team of people, you're leading a mix of algorithms and people, which is really exciting. So just a brief note on ChatGPT. Just gonna check my time. Yeah. So I know that a lot of people are excited about it, but why the behavioral science is great in understanding this phenomenon of ChatGPT and why it is so popular is actually ChatGPT is a quite stupid algorithm. It doesn't learn anything. What it shows you, it already learned, right? So it was trained on 175 billion variables and on a lot of text, right? Lots of text observations. But it actually doesn't learn anything when you are typing and retyping and you're trying to kind of create different queries. So there is no feedback loop in this program. So in a sense, it's not actually a smart algorithm. What it is, even though it's more popular than other algorithms out there, it's like a game of like Trivial Pursuit or Monopoly. So you can have different scenarios, based on the, you know, the game setup. But, you know, the game itself doesn't change. So, and in that sense, you know, it's very important to have other methods where we can make algorithms understand people better and make algorithms serve the values of humans better. So this is what the, you know, behavioral data science is all about, because, you know, we have a lot of deficiencies of algorithms. We can still fool the algorithms with, you know, like if we have a banana on one side and we add a sticker, you know, we no longer, the algorithm no longer recognizes it as a banana, will recognize it as something else. The algorithms will recognize like random noise as something. Equally here. Or, you know, it cannot tell the difference between a dog and a muffin, a dog and a, you know, bread, yeah, croissant, and things like this. So yeah, there is a lot of stupidity in machines because machines do not think like humans. They try to mimic us, like ChatGPT tries to mimic communication, but mimicking is not actual communication. It's not actual understanding of human values. So in behavioral data science, we have, in straight behavioral science, we kind of have two approaches. One approach works with models, mathematical models, and another one works with heuristics and biases. So what is the difference? So here, we kind of mostly assume that people have some sort of rationality or some sort of rules based on which they're making decisions. And the other kind of camp of behavioral science believes that, oh, it's all about heuristics and common sense. So yeah, if you are kind of in first strand, you will be working with models like this. If you are in second strand, you will be working with a bunch of heuristics and biases. And with my co-author Karen Renaud, we put them nicely in a table for you. But there are 202 biases and heuristics here in this table, and there are probably more, right? And the point is, yeah, like there are all these different views, but they help us understand humans, right? And they help us form theories about humans. So I promised you that I will give some examples based on these methodological groups that I identified at the beginning. So the first one is when we take standard behavioral science and then we just, conduct a study using large database. So I talked a lot about jobs today, and in this particular project, we looked at all data touching professions within organizations. And basically, we were trying to understand why there is lack of efficiency between different departments involving data science and data analytics. And basically what you see here is, so what we've done is we mined all job descriptions that are out there that contain the data science or data analytics in it, or related fields like cybersecurity. And what we found was, considering our basic division according to behavioral science into basic creative and social skills that you need for different jobs, what we found was that there was a lot of overlap on basic skills and some on creative, but all these professions were really shallow on social component. So what does it tell us? It basically tells us that, first of all, when we have data scientists, for example, in different departments, we think that there is duplication of skill, but actually there is no duplication of skill. We just do not communicate well enough. And second thing that we understand from this study is that we need to teach data science in different way. We actually need to create this social buffer. We need to create social skills when we're teaching data science so that we have better communication between departments in the same organization. So the next trend is using traditional data science to solve interesting behavioral problems. So this is a project that we've done with a very large Australian bank. This project was about human habits. So we were actually looking at habits before and after a particular crisis, and we had bushfire and COVID use cases. And essentially we were trying to predict people that will fall into financial hardship as a result of a crisis. And the way we've done it is by understanding habits. What financial habits you had before the crisis, right? And we used a very standard model for it that is used in many data science studies. It's associations rules mining. So if you don't know what it is, this is basically what they use in supermarkets to understand how to position goods in supermarkets. So one of the funniest things that this algorithm produced is the fact that there is a correlation between buying diapers and beer. So people who buy diapers are like 95% likely to buy beer at the same time, which is why in supermarkets you often find these things close together. But we thought, why just apply it to supermarket stuff? Why just apply it to diapers and beer? Like, we can actually apply it to financial transactions. And this is what we've done in this study. So we had a really good sample, many thousands of people, many millions of observations over several years. And basically, what we did, we looked at people's kind of rules associations before the crisis and after the crisis. And what it allowed us to do, it allowed us to identify what resilient, vulnerable, and well-calibrated habits looked like, right? So essentially, people with who are resilient to financial, for example, to COVID, so who financially came out better off as a result of COVID, they had fewer rules. And they also had, these rules were not very flexible, but there were few of them, so it was easy to adjust. So for example, if I have a rule that I'm going out every Friday, right, I would just order Uber Eats or something like this. So it's a robust rule, but it would be like adaptable. Then we would have well-calibrated people who had relatively many rules, but they were very flexible. So, you know, you had a really good capacity to change and you would be able to adapt quickly. But people who were vulnerable, so in a sense that they came out actually worse off as a result of the crisis, these were people who had many rules and very low flexibility. So the cool thing about this project is we are able to identify these behavioral types 1 year ahead of the crisis. So we can actually look at these profiles, identify them, and then, you know, if something happens, we can actually work with the right population and prevent, you know, them falling into debt or, you know, experiencing negative financial outcomes. So I'm almost done, but yeah, I want to show you a few other examples. So this is a strand where we detect deficiencies in data science methods. And there are deficiencies in data science methods. Well, remember the dog and the muffin? That's one of them. But I want to show you this one as kind of one of my favorite examples when we take the photo of Barack Obama, right? And we try to reconstruct it and we get a white guy. And why we get a white guy is because we have a data set that is incomplete or biased. So, you know, we just have too many photos of white people in the data, in the training set. And this is how it reconstructs a photograph when we're trying to do it. So, and these deficiencies and problems with algorithms, they come up on a regular basis because previously when we would write algorithms, we could simply solve very simple bugs in them. But now it's not enough. It's almost like you need a psychiatrist for an algorithm, right? So it's very difficult to figure out what's wrong with it. So for this particular project, what we do is we actually looking at how people did job crafting during COVID. Job crafting is basically refers to a situation when you are changing your job during the crisis. So you can take up more tasks, you can decide that you need to upskill, you can decide that you need additional responsibilities or fewer responsibilities. And these are the restrictions that we had in different countries. So here we have UK, US, and China data. And basically, yeah, we're looking at how people adjust to their jobs dependent on the number of restrictions that are out there. And I'm just gonna skip ahead to the results. So basically, what we found in this project is the best strategy for a crisis is for you to kind of increase the number of tasks that you're doing, increase the complexity of your job, and then adjust it down and adjust your kind of job description down once the crisis is kind of easing and once it's over. In that case, you will not experience unemployment and you will not experience burnout. But actually, one of the worst scenarios, in fact, the worst scenario is kind of trying. So essentially, like what you should be doing is, you should be thinking, oh, maybe I should do something additional in my job. Maybe I should take up, organizing a seminar or organizing a yoga group, like online yoga group in COVID situation, things like this. But actually, the people who were really worse off were the people who were trying to downsize. So those who try to downsize on the tasks and how try to kind of think how to, run the most risk-averse strategy in the crisis in terms of their jobs, they were worse off. Not only did they, many of them lost their jobs, but also they experienced burnout because they were constantly thinking, how do I minimize, how do I minimize my tasks? Yeah, so this is quite complicated. I'm not gonna go too much into detail here, but this is what I do on a regular basis. These are hybrid models. And this is where we basically take standard machine learning models and we pre-treat them with some decision theories. So it allows us to create very efficient algorithms that allow us to make very precise predictions of what people are going to do. So imagine that you have a choice between a red car and a blue car, and these cars have a lot of attributes, right? Lots of characteristics. So normally what machine learning model would do, it will kind of sample different baskets of attributes, and dependent on whether you ultimately have chosen blue or red car, it would kind of take each basket and look at, so this basket is latent, we don't know what's inside it, but basically the algorithm would look at, does this basket explain your choice? Does this basket explain your choice? So it's a very tedious process, and in the end, it's a black box algorithm. We don't know why the algorithm picks this particular basket and what's inside it. But from decision theory, we know how people are making choices. So we actually can, given this example, let's just say that these cars are very similar, but like I said, one car is blue, the other one is red. So from decision theory, we can say that color will be an important factor in your decision making, right? So usually, obviously, it's more sophisticated. I'm just using this as a simple example. So what does it mean? It means that we don't actually need to sample everything. We can just sample the baskets that have color in it, right? So by doing this, I kind of slice my calculations in half and I make them more accurate because, I know that the color will be important. right? So this is how we do. We have done a lot of work on suggestion systems. So this is a project where we try to predict people's choices of films, of the films that they watch. And not only did we achieve higher satisfaction levels, but also we achieved higher engagement on this particular platform for people who used algorithm based on the method that I just showed you, which is called anthropomorphic learning. Yeah, and just to kind of wrap it up, I want to show you one more study that I've been doing for the last 5 years, and it's really cool from my perspective because it's about how people perceive technology. So it's one thing to develop all these fantastic algorithms, but it's quite another to look at how well people actually understanding technology. So this is my dog who passed away, but he was an experimentalist dog. And this thing that he wears is called Fitbark. It's like Fitbit only for dogs. So it collects all the data. And this is the data on my dog. So it's basically his day. So basically, what does it mean? It means that I can take this data and I can upload it to a thing like this, a robotic dog, and it will behave exactly like my dog, right? But it doesn't mean that I will interact with the robot like I did with my actual dog, right? This is an important concept, and to what extent we kind of understand the technology, to what extent we can tell the difference is important. So in this particular project, we looked for over the period of 5 years at how well people understand or perceive or can identify and detect deepfakes. So you all know about deepfakes. So these are essentially, either video, text, or audio a type of media that kind of poses as someone, right? Normally a celebrity, or like here we have an example of Ukrainian president that was kind of faked by Russian propaganda, where he was saying that, well, we need to surrender, but obviously Ukrainian people didn't buy it. So yeah, we have quite a long history of these things, like back to, for example, to the Soviet era when, the photographs were doctored and we had different realities. So this is another example that I'm sure all of you have seen, the fake resignation by President Nixon that was done by MIT Media Lab. So we have all these deep fakes, and we have different types of algorithms that generate them, and we, over a course of 5 years, we were trying to understand, are we becoming better or are we becoming worse in recognizing deepfakes? And we measure a lot of psychological parameters with our participants. And yeah, we have quite a lot of countries here. So we started with US and UK, but now we have Canada, Australia, and New Zealand. And we have different contexts. We have celebrities that we show to people, but we also show them regular people, which makes it quite difficult to pick up that it's a deep fake. And the result of this study was quite striking. We found that actually, well, first of all, we are becoming worse at identifying deepfakes because deepfakes become more sophisticated. But there is a silver lining here. Well, I'm actually a believer that we will adapt. We will become better when we develop more experience in talking to machines and looking at them. And we found out there's actually 3 main human characteristics that make you exceptionally good at identifying deepfakes, because in our tests there are people who always get it right, like 100% all the time. So, and what we decided to do is we decided to understand what is it about these people that is different from the rest. And that's what we found, basically. They have 3 characteristics: conscientiousness, emotional intelligence, and prevention focus. Conscientiousness is attention to detail. So when you're essentially, very meticulous, very attentive to detail. Emotional intelligence is when you're obviously good at recognizing people's emotions. And prevention focus is essentially well, it's basically focusing on preventing losses, right? So you are becoming, again, particularly attentive, you're very careful. So people who are whom we call deepfake sensors, so they're actually very, very good at identifying deepfakes. These people are a lot more conscientious, a lot more emotionally intelligent, and a lot more preventive than the average. This basically tells us that, you know, people with these characteristics can identify deepfakes really, really well. So now our task is to figure out how to teach everybody else to do it, right? So how do we teach conscientiousness, emotional intelligence, and prevention? I'm going to stop here, and I just want to thank you for being here and for being with us online. Yeah.
Thank you, Ganna. That's fascinating stuff. I mean, I've just realised that, in a sense, I've been studying the fourth industrial revolution all my life through popular culture. You know, if you think about it, you know, Star Wars and the Clone Wars, you know, AI armies, or Terminator and Skynet and all the ethics around Skynet. You know, my favorite, Blade Runner.
Yeah, there is actually a very good British series. It's called Outer Limits. I really recommend you to watch that. It was made in the 90s, and it's got, like, I don't know, 200 episodes. And it's basically every single futuristic scenario that you can imagine, and everything that can go wrong, like in terms of, you know, ethics and other things within it.
Yes, of course, that's the key point, because all of those films have big ethical issues that emerge from this. And I think what's quite interesting, and I guess this isn't just in Australia, but more broadly, that actually we've been discussing those issues through popular culture, but we've not really been discussing those issues as much through public policy or public debate. And well, that's an interesting observation in itself. But what do you think are the fundamental ethical issues to do with AI that we need to get to grips with really quite urgently?
Yeah, I think, well, there are a few, right? So the first one is obviously the black box issue. I mean, we are trying to solve it in different ways, but we still, in many cases, do not know how, you know, how the algorithm is making choices and why this is happening. So the second thing, I mean, I'm just going to go with data, you know, data usage, not so much with data privacy, because, well, let's just say I come to you and say, Mark, I want to look at your, I don't know, shopping habits for research purposes. Is it okay if I do that? And you probably say, yeah, fine, why not? But then imagine that I take your shopping habits and I combine it with some other data. Then suddenly I know something about you that you don't want me to know, right? And then there is this whole big problem. And yeah, there was a very cool example that I really like about it. A few years back, New York Yellow Cabs company released its data for public use. So what you could see in that data set is, well, a passenger was picked up at point A and dropped off at point B. I just want to invite audience to guess who were the top users of this database. It was a live database, so you could actually, you know, observe it live. Who do you think used it most? Any guesses, or give me some guess? Yeah, students. Yeah. What? Well, not quite criminals. They were paparazzis. So the reason why the paparazzis were really interested in it, imagine that you are following, I don't know, Scarlett Johansson, right? And you know that Scarlett Johansson got into a cab at a certain point, right? Then you don't even need to go to point B because you can see it in the database. And imagine that that point B is a private residence, right? So all of a sudden you know where Scarlett Johansson lives, even without following her in the car, right? So this is kind of the type of challenge that we have, and obviously. Kind of more, I guess, more fundamental problems that we have with the whole debate around, what relationship should we have with technology, right? To what extent technology should intervene into people's lives? To what extent we should, regulate it? That would be, I guess, another big one.
Well, I guess there's the Darth Vader point, the hybrid point as well, as that as this technology advances, you will see people becoming half machine, half human.
Yeah, I mean, you actually hit the good point, because every time when we ask people about AI in the lab, they imagine Terminators and Skynet. And we're trying to explain to them that, we're quite far away from developing Terminators. So Terminators are basically machines that determine their own purpose and determine the means to get to the purpose. Well, at the moment we have what we call autotelonomic machines. So these are machines that that are given the purpose, but then they can determine their own pathway to the purpose. So, for example, you can have a automated vacuum cleaner, and you can just tell it, clean the room, right? But then it determines how to clean the room in its own way. But it cannot determine the task to clean the room. Yeah. So, but this is very common when people imagine that there is a Terminator. But there are kind of deeper issues here. For example, let's take driverless car that hit a pedestrian in Arizona, right, in 2016. And there is an ethical issue there because, this is a loss of human life over the fact that algorithm wasn't ready, ready to be used on the road, right? And there is not only a question of responsibility, was Uber responsible because they put it on the road, or city council who allowed it, or the human operator who was sitting at the wheel and wasn't paying attention, because ultimately between the time between the car hit the pedestrian, saw the pedestrian and hit the pedestrian was 6 seconds. So that's actually enough time for a human driver to react and stop on time. And to what extent the technology is ready for us to engage with it, that's a big question.
And how ready we are.
And how ready we are.
Well.
Absolutely.
I mean, I was thinking, the first article I wrote in 1994 was on regulation theory. And regulation theory at that time focused on the impact of technology on the workforce. And we were basically told at that time that the big public policy question was, if the majority of the workforce are going to be out of work through the traditional labor market, how do we destigmatize unemployment? How do we create new types of job for the future? That was in 1994. And obviously your first slides were all about, these are potentially the areas where we're going to see the change. But we're actually still waiting for the change.
Yeah.
And actually the preparation for change hasn't been that significant either. I mean, we know that behind the scenes governments are making choices. So, for example, there was a project that I was involved in called the Nadia project, which for me was really interesting because, Nadia basically was invented by Mark Sager, who's a professor at Auckland University. He won an Oscar for Spider-Man, right? And Nadia basically was an AI public servant, actually it was Kate Blanchett, providing advice through the National Disability Insurance Scheme, right? And I was involved in the project that developed Nadia, right? And basically, it went as far as they were very serious trials took place with really amazing results, right? So on average, people on the scheme were spending 1 hour and 15 minutes with Nadia. And Nadia wasn't just giving information out, she was actually building relationships. She was actually providing a sense of therapy and security for a lot of people who don't have people to talk to about these issues. So all the pilots, really, really successful. Then what happens? This is undeterminable. There's an election around the corner. Senate estimates actually records that there will be 40,000 job losses, and there will be savings from those 40,000 jobs around call centers, right? Then what happens is they model where those call centers are. They're all in marginal constituencies, right? So suddenly minister says, we can't do this, right? And now Nadia is sitting in the atrium of the Department of Social Services in Canberra. And it's been there since just before that election. So I guess what I'm saying is governments make choices about the pace of change, right? And so for you, where do you see, because it seems that this era is very, very fast in terms of rapid change, but where do you see kind of the new big discoveries that are going to transform our everyday lives? Maybe in 5 years' time, what will be the big changes that we will experience as citizens?
Yeah, so I'm going to be biased, and I will say that, obviously it's in the hybrid models area. So for me, the biggest task, and I think the interesting challenge, and where I'd like the behavioral data science to be, is when the algorithms are created with human values in mind, right? So when it's actually executing some of the value systems that we have. Like an example that I can give is First Nations. Right, First Nations are completely invisible to AI systems because current AI systems are created as human-centric or business-centric, but they're not country-centric, right? And indigenous or First Nations philosophy is all about the country. So we're not even having these algorithms in existence. And this is where I think behavioral data science is important, because with understanding the values, and understanding how we can take behavioral methods that nurture these values, we can actually develop better algorithms that serve the community better. So that's where I'd like it to be. And I think that that's it, where it should be in 5 years' time.
Are there prospects for improving democracy there, for example? So I know that there's been some experiments in certain US states about developing avatars for citizens. Citizens answer a whole range of questions around preferences on public policy choices, and then they have their avatar, and their avatar sits in a virtual assembly and makes decisions basically through direct democracy arrangements. Can you envisage that?
Well, I think that we saw examples when AI hurt democracy. So basically we have technology is a tool, right? And you can use it for good and for evil. We saw, for example, Cambridge Analytica that manipulated public opinion. Well, there is still debated to what extent, but it happened. Yeah, certainly. I think that where it could really provide good opportunities is with, let's just say, for example, disability or inclusion. Where we have people who are currently not engaged in the public discourse, or in in democratic processes. So if technology gives them more opportunities to do that, yeah. So yeah, of course, if you're living in a remote area and it takes you ages to get to a voting station, and instead you can vote in a different way. That is definitely something that technology do, and I personally would really like to see it happen. Yeah.
But trust is clearly key, isn't it? Building that trust.
Yeah, of course. Yeah.
I haven't got any questions coming through Slido yet. So for those people online, I encourage you to ask questions through Slido. But have we any questions from the floor? Does anybody have a burning question that they'd like to put to Ganna? Sharon.
I'm really interested in...
I think it just the... Sorry.
Thank you so much. It's so fascinating, just the breadth of things that you have thought about. I'm just really interested in what you have done with the data from your dog.
Yeah, I have all sorts of data. I also have, for example, a few years back, my mom wanted to lose weight. I have very detailed data on her, yeah, she kind of she managed to lose weight with my help. So yeah, I actually very often collect data on people who are around me, but luckily, they are tolerable, and equally with it was the same with the dog. Yeah, so how I use it is, we have a few robotic dogs, and yeah, we kind of test various programs, based on the data that I have, and yeah, but it's just, I guess habit, always to collect data.
Question here?
Yeah.
Hi, just a quick question in regards to the different revolutions we've gone through. I believe the time between each revolution shortens in between revolutions. So as you've described, we are in the fourth revolution, AI revolution. What's going to be the next revolution? When's it happen? And can AI predict it, or can we predict it?
Yeah, I mean, it's a good question. So what happens beyond, Industrial Revolution 4.0? I think it's already happening. I think it will be sort of more, it's more kind of a revolution of minds in my view, because people become really reliant on algorithms in their choice, which is like a real danger. For example, while we think that we make choices on social media, for example, but in fact they are not human choices, they're algorithmic choices. So what you see as your kind of highlights that you're choosing from is chosen by the algorithm. Equally, people are using ChatGPT a lot, and it has been shown already that it kind of inbreeds, right? Like if you're using it, it kind of becomes more stupid over time. Yeah, so it's interesting how we are going to adapt to this, and sort of as a result, will there be some sort of like human algorithmic mind, or will it be human mind, right? With understanding of the limitations of the algorithmic mind. Yeah. So I think it will be more about our consciousness and less about, automating something at work.
I guess the interdisciplinarity in terms of the work that you've identified provides some clues. So for example, nanotechnology and miniaturization makes a whole range of things possible that weren't possible before. So for example, how the smartphone might be replaced through some sort of chip, that sort of thing.
Well, I mean, there are also a lot of kind of cybersecurity, new cybersecurity challenges where it will be more about, disrupting somebody's kind of device, that, I don't know, some sort of thing that helps your health, right, rather than trying to disrupt your computer. So yeah, there are a lot of interesting things, but yeah, having around people working in different disciplines helps, and I have my team here. and they all work in different fields, completely different fields. And we have in our institute people who work in fundamental, physics, and can make things like liquid chips, microchips, things like that, to digital health and blockchain and all other things. So I think that it always helps to talk to people from different fields, because that's how you move forward. And but what I want to say is that the progress, whatever it is, would require closer synergies between completely different fields. So it's no longer just, economists talking to psychologists, but it will be like physicists talking to behavioral scientists, or, health talking to, I don't know, robotics, things like this. Yeah.
So the implications for a university like this really are very, very significant, aren't they? In terms of breaking down silos between disciplines. And it's an opportunity for real interdisciplinarity to take place. Given that we're here in a university then, how do you think that the student experience could change as a consequence of AI?
Yeah, so if you think about it, we're educating people who will be retiring in 50, 60 years' time. And I think that's scary, because we have no idea what challenges are going to be, right? And that's why I personally think that teaching that transferable component is very important. And to me, I was kind of doing some thinking around it, and recently I met kind of teachers organization who are organizing sort of challenges for high school students. And I think they found the perfect formula, and it's participating in research projects. It's actually involving people in research from very, very early age, because whatever you are thinking about your research project never works, right? Like you thought it would. So you always have to adapt. So I think these transferable skills really develop when we involve, school kids in research from a very early age, and then, students. So I think to be really adaptable, to teach that transferability, we really need to have more research component to each subject in the university. So I guess it means more work for you, Mark, in the future.
But I'm also thinking about, will we see a time basically when every student has an AI buddy, for example, that helps support them through their degree, through their educational experience? Or might that be a source of inequality?
Well, I think it already happened, right? Because ChatGPT, in a sense, is everybody's buddy. I don't know whether it's a good buddy or is a friend or a foe. That's another question. It just depends on how you use it, right? I just think that people who, maybe with research experience, even, basic research experience, they probably can find better ways to use that buddy. But yeah, I mean, in terms of, traveling with a robot, I think many people are open to it. For example, we often ask people, would you be open to be taught by a robot? And a lot of people say yes to that question. But interestingly, when we ask them, would you like your kid to be taught by a robot, they say no. So there is a lot of tolerance, towards kind of when they're talking about themselves, and completely different when they're talking about someone else. Yeah, in terms of, will it happen? I think it already happened. We have support, algorithmic support in different levels. It probably will get shinier and more sophisticated, cuter, and maybe a little bit more entertaining. But in the essence, we already are there.
Yeah. I think there is a danger there, though, that rich people will have access to higher quality advice and technology, which will give them competitive advantage. So that's something that we'll need to.
But that again is already there, and we again at AI and Cyber Futures Institute constantly highlight the difference between rural and urban areas, where effectively people from rural areas are the ones who providing the data for training. If we take rural areas, most people there are on Android phones rather than on iPhones. And there is exponentially more data collected from Android phones, and a lot of data sets are based on them. But then we take that data, and that data benefits, and models that are built on that data benefits people in urban contexts and urban environments. So there's definitely inequality. But again, I just want to say that technology can be something that divides, but it can also be used as a social lift, right? And it just depends how we do it. And this is where public policy comes in. And there is a lot to be done in this area, I think.
Well, look, we've come to the end of our time together. Thank you so much, Ganna, for such a thought-provoking address. For those of you who are interested, follow our Provocations blog and other artifacts online, and we look forward to seeing you at our next Provocations lecture, which is the 16th of November, which is Lee Baumgartner, and Lee is basically talking about the work that he's doing around water security across the world. So thank you so much, Ganna.
Thank you.
I should say as well that there's drinks and refreshments and food through there for those people who would like to come together and enjoy more conversation. Cheers.